Welcome to Camera Ready and Able, the podcast that explores the intersection of media, change, and personal growth. I'm your host, Barbara Barna Abel, and my calling is to help you tap into your superpowers, clarify your message, and make an impact on the world. Today's episode is brought to you by the phrase, becoming known. The good people at Macmillan offer these synonyms for becoming known: come out, get around, emerge, spread, circulate, and my favorite, percolate. I can't wait to talk about this. So I'm delighted to welcome Candis Hickman to the show. Candis is a personal branding coach who helps the spirit-led entrepreneur brand herself, start shining, and finally become known. Candis, big, warm-hearted welcome to you. We have a lot to talk about.
We do indeed, and thank you. I love that percolate and all those words related to becoming known.
Me too. So, let's just dive in. What does becoming known mean to you?
There's two parts to becoming known for me. There is the aspect to which we become known to ourselves and we get to know ourselves on a deeper level before we can become known to others. And so, I came up with this concept of becoming known a while ago because I started to realize that people were coming to me as a coach, and the underlying feeling that they were having was this desire to use their voice and for people to recognize them for their work and to make an impact in the world, like all those really like ethereal concepts. And but I recognized that the people that were truly making the impact that they wanted to make in the world and in their work, they really had a deep understanding of who they were. And it's really hard to start putting yourself out there, to start sharing your story or making any type of impact in the world if you don't even know what you stand for, what your story is, and what it is that you actually want to be known for.
I can't even just tell you how much I love this. And I'm so excited. And I have to kind of like calm myself down before I just like jump at you. So thank you for actually just bringing that up, because that was one of my first notes and for anyone listening, Candis and I have known each other for a few years. And that concept is one of the first things that just attracted me to you, is you're the first person to synthesize that in a way, just to say, in order to become known, one must first become known to oneself. What are some of the first steps that you recommend to others? But also, you and I have both gone through this process. Mm-hmm. And for yourself, that, what it means to become known to yourself, and that it actually is an ongoing process.
It is an ongoing process. I think the first step is always becoming a master of questioning, and I think that's the industry you're in. And I think probably so many people that are listening to this podcast is we have to become a master of asking questions of ourselves and being deeply curious about ourselves. And, I think a lot of the times people embark upon this journey to become known or to themselves, to others, and they don't know where to start, and they don't have that starting point. And for me, it's really it's about deep curiosity. Like, you have to be deeply curious about your life. I'm somebody that wants to know the why of the why of the why. Every time I think that I've like hit the bottom, there's like a little bit more to uncover. But that all begins with asking better questions of yourself so that you can continue to move forward.
Can you give me an example of what a better question would be?
What would a better question be? I think it always starts with why. I think it's, why am I interested in this? Why do I behave in this way? Why are these feelings actually showing up for me in response to me sharing my story, or in response to my own identity, which is, something that I've been exploring over the last couple of years, the last year in particular. And for a lot of people, Barbara, I just want to bring this up because share this little story with you. I actually have this coaching program. And I realized at the beginning of the coaching program, it's like a group coaching program called the Captivating Coach. And I had this realization that I would show up for coaching calls as the coach, and people would arrive and they wouldn't know. We had these weekly Q&As, and they wouldn't even know what questions to actually ask me. And so I developed like 3 pages of questions. Like, these are the questions that you can ask. that to start spurring your own thinking, to develop your own questionings. But I realized the first question that you really need to ask at the point that you feel stuck or you don't know where to go or what's the next right move, is I feel stuck. What do I need to know, or what questions do I need to be asking of myself in order to go deeper?
I love that. One of the things I have to presume is that you bump up against fear a lot,
Mm-hmm.
because that, is cousin, best friend, whatever, of stuck. So what are some of your recommendations when fear takes over? Because even when you're stuck and you're asking questions, we often can't see what's right in front of us.
Mm-hmm. I think it always starts with the acknowledgement of fear, doesn't it? I think that we can't change or move through anything until we've actually brought awareness to the fact that it's a reality for us. So I think the first step of moving through any types of fear is just the acknowledgement that it exists. It's something that it's spoken about a lot in our industry, as in the coaching world, is the idea of accountability and like that mentorship, having the space and people to actually hold you, in moments of fear, and to be able to guide you, finding a guide. I think it's about recognizing that there's no greater investment than the one that we make into ourselves. And I'm not just talking financially, but I'm talking time-wise, and the spaciousness that we give ourselves to actually explore and to understand fear. And so I think that there's so many ways that we can begin to move through fear, but it all begins with the actual acknowledgement of it and the seeking to understand how we can move through it.
A word that has come up for me a lot that relates to that is resistance. And sometimes that might be an easier frame for some people who, if it's too hard to be like, I'm afraid, then to ask yourself, well, then what am I resistant to? What is that? What am I feeling? But the other thing I want to acknowledge too is you and I, sisters in arms here, we can intellectualize through anything, because the asking of why is the thinking through the issue. And one of the things that you've actually helped me with was starting to look at, it's like, well, what's the emotional component here? What am I feeling? And then learning to connect that actually to physical sensations, meaning, it's just another approach. If you're feeling stuck, it's like, wow, do I hold tension around this? Is that maybe a cue I should be listening to, so that I'm not always relying on my intellectual curiosity to propel me forward, or we get to a certain point. But with that, actually moving on, I want to ask you, because this gets into, our own conversations over the last few years, but a really, really big word here that relates obviously to becoming known is identity, and certainly a big part of your journey. So I would love for you, if you're comfortable, to like dive in a little bit more about how that has come up for you.
Well, yeah, that's identity has been, it was probably the word of 2020 without me even actually intending it to be at the beginning of that year. So I'm biracial. My dad is Black, he's African American, and my mum is white. She's born Australian, so I was born and raised in Australia. And racial identity and biracial identity is something that I began exploring in about March of last year, right before the events of the murder of George Floyd. And so I had been diving into it because there was this aspect of me that always has felt like, well, where do I belong? This feeling of like belonging, and when I'm speaking and I'm being public with my work, well, who is really resonating with what I'm saying? And as I was exploring these dynamics around racial identity, I started to reflect and think back through my childhood and all of the ways in which I have, I guess. I don't know if oppressed is like too if it's too heavy a word for it, but the ways in which I think I've been silenced, or the ways in which I have never fully lived in the fullest expression of who I am, without even actually consciously recognizing that this aspect of identity was something that encroached on my ability to be able to do that. And it was one of those things that I thought, I'm talking about becoming known. I say to people that in order to become known to others, they have to become known to themselves. And then this huge aspect of identity, I don't necessarily feel like I've fully explored. And look, let me tell you, I'm still exploring it. And, it's still coming around for me, and I'm still kind of exploring my feelings. But I will say, after a big portion of exploration and reading and conversations with all different types of people around this issue of this aspect of my identity, I truly came to feel even more solidified in who I am as a person. Just nothing necessarily shifted other than my perception. And I think that that's really, something that's really important. And even to note, when you just in reference to the conversation around fear, just bringing that back, is that you said, well, stuck might be fear and it might be resistance, but it can be so many things. It can represent as procrastination or perfectionism, or like there's so many areas in which, like that actually plays out. But when you feel like solid in your core and in the sense of who you are, it just you have something to return to when you start to lose your way.
So what's the new story that you tell yourself
Around the belonging
and identity, and just what you said of having that feeling in your core?
That I am a whole integrated person with a unique story and perspective, and that belonging in many ways is something that I have to find and reconcile within myself. And I know that it might sound a little bit out there for people that maybe don't have this experience of what I'm from the aspect of being biracial, but you might have been able to experience that in feeling like you're in a situation where you're like a fish out of water, and realizing that there's nobody out, because I've been accepted into many different spaces, right? And so from an outsider's perspective, they might hear that and be like, oh, Candis, you've always fit in. Or Candis, you've always, like, it's hard as an outsider to look in and understand. But when you're sitting within a body with cultures and racial identities that are literally in opposition to each other a lot of the time, and that those two identities actually kind of exist inside of you, is this capacity to be able to reconcile and come to terms with the fact that you aren't half and half, right? You aren't two halves of, like, you are whole. And for me, it's been a journey of recognizing that there is no one way, that there are multiple expressions of being Black, there are multiple expressions of being biracial, and that I am my own unique expression of it. I'm the only Black, white, biracial Australian that I actually, African American that I actually know. I'm sure there are plenty of other people out there. If you're listening and you are, hit me up. But I don't know any other Australians that Australian, African American, but like, I don't know anyone like me. And for a long time I embraced that. The more I got to know, the more I started to struggle with it, but almost coming full circle with the recognition that I can have all these aspects of who I am, that they come together to make a really unique, special story. And I believe, allow me to express myself in a way that is unique to me.
Well, going back to how deep this is in terms of a mindset shift and our own, perspective, which is invariably the only thing that we really can control in some situations, but often one of the hardest things to do, is then now how this has shown up in your work and your purpose. Because, as a happy bystander, watching, the last 12 or 18 months that you've had is inspiring and extraordinary. And one of the reasons why I was so, eager and sort of urgent, like, I've got to talk to Candis about this.
In terms of the work, that this has actually been, and you've actually got me really like at the perfect time, because this has been a conversation for me, like, how do I integrate these aspects of identity into the work that I do? And I had this little story. I'm going to tell you the story that triggered this, but I was asked to sit on a panel for Black History Month in February. I had this moment where I literally had this, should I do it? Okay, like, because one of the things that a lot of Black biracial people will tell you is this fear around being Black enough, right? And that's true for a lot, particularly I think if you've grown up with, you know, predominantly within a white community, raised by like my mother's white, and I grew up in a white community for the most part. And so I said, you know what, I am Black, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to sit on this panel. But literally my worst fear came to life on this panel. I was speaking and a gentleman was in the audience, the Zoom audience, and he was a Black man. And he said, I just want to know, do biracial people feel comfortable? This came up, I'm not even sure how the topic of my being biracial came up, but he said, I want to know, do biracial people feel comfortable taking funding for Black programs? And then he said, full-time Nubians want to know. And I'm going to say that I went into like a little bit of defense, because, you know, if you understand kind of like the history, and I know you do, you know, you kind of understand the history of, you know, the biracial and like the, you know, colorism, and also just all the way back to the Hemmings of Monticello, you know, you understand kind of the history there. But I was kind of taken a little bit off guard. At the same time, I think I might have manifested it because it was a situation that I feared. And, you know, but I walked away from that experience and I was kind of really bothered. And I realized that the reason why I was bothered and what I hadn't come to recognize, and someone said it to me later, is, Candis, wow, you're being silenced from both sides. And she said it, and she didn't realize how big of an impact that I think that statement would actually have on me, because I started creating these videos around biracial identity because I was exploring them and I was sharing them as I was going on kind of my channels. And I started to be really fearful, I think, that I was going to disappoint people by speaking about my biracial identity, that I was going to upset people, or that I even said to someone, I'm not an expert on mixed race identity. Like I'm like, who's an expert if not, you know, like if not someone with a lived experience. But I genuinely felt like this. I mean, she said, you know, you're being kind of silenced from both sides. I realized that is, I fear so much. Being biracial is such a controversial, like just my being in many situations is such a controversial reality for some people. And, you know, people have a lot to say about it. And the way that it kind of ties back, I think, you know, that it ties back into my work is that it's the whole concept of becoming known. It's like, it still comes full circle. Like, yeah, I'm bringing in aspects of my story, but I've come to see how important that culture and, you know, ethnic identity and racial identity actually play into our experience of becoming known. You know, it's such a crucial part to understand. And even if you choose not to like go out and publicly be speaking about these issues around race or identity, and if you don't explore it, it will always be this thing that looms and hangs, especially as a person of color, that looms and hangs over who you are. I will say, Barbara, that in response to my work, I had this one moment where I went, is this off brand? Like, I don't know if this is on brand anymore, me speaking about race. And I realized one of the reasons why I have been holding back is a lack of courage. And, you know, I actually have decided I'm actually going to launch a new blog called Courageously Candis, because I realized that the lack of courage that I've had when it comes to talking about topics of race, of culture, of confidence, of courage, of resilience, of even my story have not come through as strongly as I would have liked. But I am my own client, right? I am my own client in the sense that I'm recognizing the areas in which you said to me, Barbara, you said, and then I'm going to stop to let you interject, but you were the one, you don't understand, or maybe you do, the impact that I think that you have had on my life. And especially with one question that you asked me, and this is why I'm so passionate about questions. The one question that you asked me, you said, Candis, so you're in personal branding and you teach other people how to become known, but what do you want to be known for? What's your personal brand? And I remember just thinking like, well, I'm the person that teaches people how to have personal brands. And I remember you saying to me, but, but you should be in the spotlight as well, And I've been sitting with that for a really long time. I write about it. I actually wrote about it. I've been writing a book. I wrote about that. You're in my book, because I've been thinking about that question so much, and realizing the ways in which I have even been fearful of sharing my story, of using my voice, because I couldn't figure out where I fit. And so I'm actually really excited about this Courageously Candis blog, just as an opportunity for me to use my voice and speak about things outside of business and outside of branding that are still relevant to the work that I do, but that is really just all about me sharing this aspect of identity.
Wow, I can't tell you how excited I am about Courageously Candis, and how, again, this all does circle back. For my perch, I think anything is on brand in becoming known. If you're becoming known, that's easy for me to say because I'm sitting over here. It's not my story. And yet I do want to share that, right back at you, you just, without even thinking, this is your gift. You just tossed off to me when I was like, I'm having a hard time connecting the dots and explaining what it is that I do. And you just, without even thinking, was like, well, you help people of impact make an impact. And I was like, oh, I do. And then, like, what does that mean? But I'm going to give this back to you because you're a person of impact, right? And so, and I bring that up because after identity, impact is the other word on my fancy blue card I have here for my show. And exploring what does that mean to be a person of impact and to make an impact. And just like a sidebar for a second, because, I've talked about this before. We can all be people of impact. That's not a highfalutin, lofty concept. That's a mindset, right? That's I'm a leader, and I also understand how I show up in the world and the impact I have on others. So that goes back to you, is just understanding the impact you have by sharing your gifts. And that's a big part of the working through resistance, right? Is to getting to that place where, through fear, whatever it is, to realize, wow, I'm really good at this. And I should be sharing all of these gifts. And it is a messy process, and it has its, starts and stops, and it's good days and hard days. I can't thank you enough, because that's, at the end of the day, what it's all about. So one of what's the tagline, in your business, is helping spirit-led entrepreneurs. So I'd love to circle back to that, to sort of step into their light, shine, let go of whatever's holding her back. So can we speak to that for a sec?
When I started thinking about, what does most of the people that come to me, what is the kind of deeper desire? And it's like one of those core survival needs that Donald Miller speaks about in building a story brand around, like, recognition and status. And I had this realization that people come to me because, even if they're kind of ashamed to admit it, they want to become known, right? They know that they have a story and they have a gift, that it's worthy of recognition and of compensation. They believe in their capacity to share a perspective or a tool or something that positively impacts the lives of the people around them. But I didn't want to just work with any old entrepreneur or any business owner. I love helping the people, and this comes to spirit-led. I love helping the people that want to change the world. I love helping the people that are like, I want to, you can relate. It's like, I just, when people say, there's this big thing in the coaching industry, oh, make 5K a month, make 10K a month. Like, that's a fantastic thing to aspire towards. But for me, it's not just, I have a deeper, the money's important, right? But there is a deeper call, I feel, to do something that truly touches other people. Have you ever read The Poetry of Living? It was a book written by Maya Angelou.
Now we're adding this to the list.
Yeah, it wasn't written by her. It was written about her. And it's not a novel. Basically, it's a book, and it's a series of quotes and pictures and just stories about Maya Angelou, written by people that knew her. And I remember getting this book and reading this book and reading the things that people had to say about her. And I felt it through my entire body. I thought, man, I hope that I live my life in such a way that others say the same or something similar. I just thought, what a powerful, I don't know if it's a tribute, a powerful tribute to somebody who genuinely lived a life that was worth remembering. And I just, I'm 33, but I'm like well into thinking about like legacy, what I leave behind, building the future. And I love people that are on that same wavelength. And I love uplifting and helping other people who have this vision for themselves to support them to get there. And so that's why I say spirit-led entrepreneurs, and because I also, and shine their light and become known. The reason why I use those phrases and find their voice and fulfill their purpose is because so many of people that are led by spirit and that are want to do good in the world also fear the spotlight, because they say to themselves, but I'm not arrogant. And I don't want to be arrogant, and I don't want to promote myself, and I don't want to share my story, and I'm not doing this for the and they don't recognize that by you stepping out, stepping into the spotlight, using your voice for good, you have the capacity to make a greater impact, to serve more powerfully, to serve at a bigger level, and to really be the change maker that you want to be. And so that's why I speak to this concept of becoming known. That's why I'm so passionate about the spirit-led entrepreneur. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping them to overcome the shame or the fear that comes with thinking that arrogance is associated with being known.
That brings me to another word then that we're going to add to this. Well, there are a couple words, but one is value. Is we start to understand the value of our story. Because sometimes I find that that's a good entry point or gateway, because you and I share many clients who have that same issue, right? Is that the becoming known is outside their values. They feel like it's out of alignment with their personal values. And then how do we move that into alignment? And part of it is to understand your story has value.
Yeah. Everything is, you brought up a comment earlier about perspectives, and everything is perspectives for me. And, I went through a really challenging situation recently, and I was like, there's a way that I could see this as the person that is on this side of it. But I wonder what it would feel like if I wasn't standing on this side of it, if I was actually standing on that side of it. And so I I left my body here and my mind went over to that side, and I looked at it from that side. And then I wonder if I wasn't on this side and if I was seeing it from this person's perspective, because there was about 4 people involved in it. But I felt like I was the one that got jibbed, initially. That was the feeling. And I kind of walked my way around the circle of this situation so that I could take in the other perspectives of what they could. And it wasn't like I didn't have a conversation with these people. I genuinely just thought, what would I feel like if I was that person in that situation? What might I be thinking? And those shifting perspectives allowed me to actually come to peace with the situation, in which I don't think a lot of people would have found peace. I think that on the topic of becoming known and seeing the value in our stories, it's really easy when you're sitting in the place where you're here and it's your story and you're worried about well, what are they going to think if I launch a new website with my name? Or what are they going to think if I start trying to pitch myself? Who are they going to think I am? But then if you take yourself out of you, you leave your body where it is and you walk around the side of the circle and you look at it from the person that's reading the blog post or the person that's watching the video, or then you start to see that your work is of value, and you actually start to see how it actually is really kind of a bit arrogant for you not to share. Right? It's kind of a bit arrogant for you to be like, well, I'm not going to put this out because when at the point that you're doing that, the work has become about you, isn't it? And in actuality, the work is not about us. And that's, one of the most important things I think that I've learned is that the work is never about me. And, on the topic of, just coming back to biracial identity, a couple of weeks ago, which is kind of another reason why I created Courageously Candis, I was looking at my stats, right? I was looking at my YouTube channel, which I haven't really spent a lot of time on. Last year I was doing some things, but I was just looking at it. And I was noticing that like I get about 30 odd news. I'm not like, look, I'm not like some mega YouTube star. There's like a couple of hundred people on my channel, but I'm getting like about 30 new subscribers a month, and I'm not really doing anything to promote it. And I started looking at the videos that were actually attracting people. And every time I get a notification, like, what's it about? It's the mixed race identity videos. I kid you not. Like I've spent years like developing my craft when it comes to personal branding and learning about the coaching industry and like all these things that I think that people want to hear from me. Then I put out a couple of biracial identity videos that were created in the context of, it was my own exploration and own curiosity. And so I was just sharing them and then finding a way to make them relevant to my work. But I was just, it was curiosity, it was exploration, and it was public. Every time I get a comment, it's on one of those videos. Every new subscriber comes for one of those videos. You know, I'll have put all this effort into a video on business and I get 70 views, and then I create a mixed race identity video and it's got, 3,000 views, and they were released at the same time. And I know that those aren't big numbers, but it's like seeing the disparity between the difference in people's interests. And I say this to say that, we can sometimes within our own limited perspectives not recognize that there are people that need our work. And I didn't realize when I started just how much people needed those mixed race videos. And just to see the comments and people saying things like, oh man, I just knew, there's not a lot of information out there about this, or it's so great to see somebody knows me or sees me, or, wow. And conversations and comments from other people that have experienced and are experiencing this similar confusion of identity and this identity crisis that comes from that. And me recognizing that the work isn't about me, and sometimes we have to go where our story leads us and go where people are asking us to go.
Okay, now we've added a new word, faith, to have the faith, right? That we don't, right? To trust in oneself. You're getting a lot of signs that there's tremendous value. So now it's just have the faith in moving forward. That's very powerful. For a lot of people who may be listening or moving forward, how, just to translate for everything we've talked about into sharing it with others. So one, direct people to just go to CandisHickman.com or Google Becoming Known or go to your YouTube channel. But for you, what are some of the first steps? Because it's been really powerful. And I've seen the shift in the last year and the really, really deep impact, and how it shows also just even in the emails that you send, just the confidence in your voice and the engagement and how excited I am every time I see something in my inbox. So for anyone who's listening, it's like, okay, wow, I'm feeling, emotionally connected to this. This has awakened something. What are the steps that you recommend someone to take?
I always encourage people to really just start thinking about like, what is it that I actually want to become known for? To recognize that you might not always know right out of the gates what that actually looks like, but to have some type of sense and to take courageous action towards doing that, and to start speaking and publishing. I think it's in my own process of discovery of becoming known to myself, I've been very public about it, which not everybody has to. You don't have to do that. But I think that, as I was learning and discovering, I acknowledged, and I have always acknowledged, that I don't know everything about everything. And so I approach my publishing with a spirit of curiosity. And so maybe that's what you want to start doing. Start just publishing your content and, having a spirit of curiosity, putting yourself out there. If you need space, we spoke earlier about like having, that accountability and that space and the mentorship. There is different ways that, I personally work with people, particularly if you're in the coaching industry and, or you want to be a coach, whether it's a life coach or a wellness coach or a spirituality coach or whatever it might be. If you're a host who wants to learn how to, really connect to the heart of their story, you can go to my website and, there's information there. You can contact me directly. There's information about a masterclass that I've just put out. And I also, Barbara, I just want to give a little plug. I'm going to be launching the Courageously Candis blog in the next couple of weeks. So if you're listening to this, you might want to go over to courageouslycandis.com, particularly if you're interested in topics around what it takes to actually come to terms with your identity, culture, and the use of your own voice.
I want to also just touch on your masterful use of media to promote change and personal growth. I don't even know if you want to talk to that for a second, but just how the power of that, because I think sometimes when we say publish or anything that can be overwhelming and intimidating. So maybe one thing is just the baby step is to think about what can I say that's emotionally honest, just simply in a Facebook post or an Instagram, that it doesn't have to be a grand sweeping gesture. You don't have to publish an article yet. You don't have to do something big. Just start with the little step.
You could even just engage in conversation, right? Like social media, I think people forget that it's social. Like it was designed to be social, and there's so much content, circulating around the internet and conversations happening everywhere. And sometimes it's just a matter of making yourself being seen in conversations that are already existing, and being willing to be a part of the dialogue. And it doesn't always mean that you have to be the publisher of the content. You could just be the person that engages with it, as a starting point. But I will say that, if you feel like you are ready to figure out what your strengths are when it comes to the publishing of media, whether it, if it's video, if it's, front facing, if it's audio, like a podcast, if it's, writing is your strength, then really just lean into and just start putting yourself out there. I think that's the thing. We press play, hit record, just hit publish. Nothing has to be perfect. And I also just want to speak to the fact that I've evolved so much from where I entered this publishing journey. This publishing journey, and I say from the sense of publicly putting myself and my stories and what I cared about out into the world. When you and I first met, Barbara, I was still on the whole, visually, aesthetic wise, it was all about, because I was an image consultant and personal branding, and it was all about, it was very bright colors, very Bravo TV, you said. And because that's kind of where I started, in this world of publishing. My perspective was, I thought I was going to be the next Jeannie Mai. But, just being open to the fact that this is an evolution, and that as you speak, as you share, as you engage, you will become more known to yourself in the act of becoming known to others.
Wow. I just want to acknowledge something powerful you said in there, was that for some people, the first step to becoming known is showing up.
Yes.
Right. Because you said it's come out of the shadows, stop hiding. And so that can be participating in conversations, even if you're not ready to lead them. So that's tremendously powerful advice. And then finally, so will you share all the different places we can come find you?
Yes. So candishickman.com is my website. You can find me on Instagram, Candis Hickman. If you're a coach and interested in kind of that type of support around building a coaching business, it's Captivating Coach. And pretty much just Candis Hickman everywhere.
I love the idea of Candis Hickman everywhere. I am so grateful for you. Talk about someone who is living their brand as you live your truth. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And for everyone else listening, don't forget to hit subscribe and come back for future episodes of Camera Ready and Able.